All right, today I'm going to be working on my Rattlin RZR. So if you've got a razor, you got a rattle, or two, or three. Anyway, you've got some rattles. This video here will apply to really any Polaris RZR or Ranger that's probably ever been made. And we're going to talk about what the source of the rattle is and how to fix it. So this here is my 2013 RZR 900 XP. It's a Walker Evans edition. And if you've been following my videos, I've done a lot of updates and upgrades. DIY windshield, glass windshield. We've got the custom air system with some extra filters on the top, which keeps my belt drive super clean, my engine super clean, and get a little bit more power. Very happy with that. A lot of people like the overhead fan cooling, which is probably the #1 upgrade you can do to your RZR, so definitely take a look at that video. And there might even be some other ones I'm forgetting about out there. But today we're going to talk about the Rattlin RZR. And if you've got this problem, you're driving along and you're just hearing rattles coming out of somewhere in the back end, you start to think, oh no, is my tranny going out? Do I got a drive shaft, U-joint failing? Maybe it's a wheel bearing, maybe it's an axle, and you're just seeing dollar signs, right? This is going to be expensive. And before you go to that extreme, it might be something quite a bit simpler. So while I was doing my rear axles, which I did put some rhinos on there, very happy with those, and I did my U-joints, and I was able to get them at my local auto parts store. And I did wheel bearings. I did the factory wheel bearings on this. So I've done most of the rear end. But at the same time, I went ahead and I replaced the brake pads. And these are the factory OEM Polaris brake pads. And lo and behold, that seems to be where the rattling is coming from. So if you take a look here, Polaris has kind of a floating pad on this floating caliper here, and you've got a round peg going through a square hole. And by design, there's going to be a little bit of gap there, and that's going to cause your rattling. So there is a fix for it. I'm going to show that here in a second, but before I do, I want to talk about the brake system in general and make sure you're aware of all the things you need to do when you go to change these brake pads. So obviously, with any brake system, disc brake system, you're going to have to remove the caliper. So there's going to be a couple bolts here to be able to get this caliper off and take out your pads. There's going to be the piston that you're going to have to push back in, because your new pads will hopefully be a little wider or have a little more material on them. You put them back in there and you reverse the procedure and you're good to go, except for there's one other major step that you might have forgotten to do, and that is this adjustment screw right here. So it's an Allen key, and what you're supposed to do is, after you get your brakes put back together, you've pumped them up, everything is looking good, you want to tighten this up until you get some drag on this rotor. And as soon as you get some drag here, then you want to back this off. I believe it's like 90 degrees. Check your manual, they'll give you the exact procedure and specs for that. But that's supposed to set your brake pads you know, where Polaris wants them. I still had a problem with mine after I did that. I found that I had 2 of my brake pads that were good, and I had 2 other wheels or rotors that weren't good. They were dragging. And the way I figured that out is, once I put this thing all back together, I found a nice long stretch of road, and I drove for about a mile, going about 20 miles an hour. And then I came to a stop without using the brakes. So I just let off the gas, let it coast. As soon as it stopped, I jumped out and I used an infrared temp gun, went through the wheel, and I hit these rotors. And I found 2 of them were basically ambient temperature outside, and 2 of them were about twice that. They were definitely getting hot. So that told me I've got some drag on these brakes. Now, most likely what it is I've got a slight warp in a couple rotors just from age. You know, there's no grooves, nothing like that. They're all nice and clean, but I think I've got just some slight warpage on a couple of these. So outside of replacing this rotor here, what I did was I just backed this screw off another 1/8 of a turn, and I repeated the same procedure. And once I got it where I had no heat buildup, then I knew I had my brakes set to where I wanted them. Now, my guess is Polaris's setting might provide a little bit of drag on these brakes, you know, just to stop some of this noise, but from what I'm seeing, a lot of people are still complaining about the noise. So at least now you know some procedures you can follow to make sure you got your brakes set right. Now, what are we going to do to fix this? Well, the simplest thing is to find out a way to stop these things from just rattling up and down. And Polaris now sells a spring kit that you can buy, or you can go to your local Ace Hardware and you can pick up some springs there. And I will put the part number on the screen here, and I'll show you what they look like. Get one out of the package here. This is what they look like. Just a small little spring here, and you want to get the right spring that we're recommending here, because it has a lot to do with tension. Because you're going to be putting this spring right between these two pads. So you're going to have to take this caliper off, put the spring on, put the outside pad on, and it's going to provide pressure to push these pads out. And also it's got to make sure you've got, you know, it can compress smaller than how far this could possibly be in as these pads wear out. So these springs are key. Again, you can pick them up at Ace Hardware. I think I paid $1.50 a piece for them. You're going to need 2 for each wheel. I'm only going to do the rears because I don't notice any rattling from my front brake pads. So it might just be the rears where I'm hearing it, but I did buy enough springs to do them all. So I'm going to go ahead and get these installed. I probably won't show the whole procedure. You know, obviously it's just taking a couple bolts off and squeezing these guys in there and putting this thing back together. But we'll take it for a ride afterwards and see if we can't notice all that rattling going. All right, quick tip here. When you go to put the spring on this caliper pin, you might notice that it's tight. It actually gets hung up, and we don't want that. We want this to be able to freely slide in there. So what I've done is I need to spread these coils out ever so slightly. So I just take a pair of needle nose and twist the spring in the opposite direction. Kind of go through each coil. And what you'll do is you'll get yourself a little bit of extra room where it slides freely. And that's going to be key because this spring is going to compress and expand as it's in here. And it looks like these springs are just slightly tight. So again, I recommend you spread those out just a little bit and check that. All right, a second tip is you're going to have to take this adjustment screw, and I had to take mine out 2 full turns in order to give myself enough room to get these pads out from around these pins. So once I did that, you can see they're in there. Go ahead and compress them, make sure that they're riding freely. You don't have anything hung up. And then we'll put the caliper back on, readjust this back 2 turns in. We do recommend maybe you put a little bit of blue Loctite in there. If you can get it in a couple threads, that'll keep this thing from changing on you. And then we're done with this side, so not too bad of an install. All right, let's get the other side done and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so we got it put back together. And again, make sure you get yourself some blue Loctite in here on the top and the bottom. Keep that caliper nice and tight. Put a little bit on your set screw when you set it in there. But if you take a look now, I can't rattle those things at all. I mean, they absolutely will not move, and I have no drag. I went ahead and set my emergency brake, made sure I had good grip here, and I had good grip. So this definitely should take care of the rattle. And yeah, we'll get the other wheel done and take it for a test drive. Alright, so I know this is going to be a little hard to hear over the engine noise, but we're giving it a test drive to see if the rattle is gone. I'll do a kind of a slow going down this road here, and we'll see if the rattle's gone. I'll even apply the brake, do a little coasting, and let's see what we hear. Alright, so I'm not hearing any rattle when I let off or when I give it gas. Apply the brake. Yep. So it looks like that definitely solved the problem. So hopefully this video gave you some tips and tricks and a couple ideas on how to make your RZR a little less rattling. So I will see you on the next.